November 13th, 2022. If you were following the news that year, that date, and the location Moscow, Idaho, probably still stick with you.
Oh, absolutely. It was one of those stories. A quiet college town, and then suddenly,
Oh.
just this absolute national tragedy.
What happened inside that off-campus home was, well, it was devastating. 4 University of Idaho students, Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogen, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin were murdered.
But the thing that made it so terrifying right out of the gate was the immediate vacuum. I mean, there was no explanation.
Right. The reports confirmed that immediately. No forced entry, which is strange, no signs of robbery, and, crucially, no obvious motive.
And that's what crippled the initial investigation.
Yeah.
It suggests either a completely random act, which is horrifying,
Yeah.
or something very, very calculated.
Both are deeply unsettling scenarios.
That vacuum is just... It's the hardest thing for investigators. When you don't have a motive, your suspect pool is basically infinite. You're not looking for an ex-boyfriend or a business partner. You're looking for a ghost.
And that's our mission for today. We're going to take a deep dive into the documents, the reports, and really unpack how investigators solved a seemingly impossible crime.
And we'll get into the suspect himself, who is a huge surprise, and why, even now in 2025, the biggest question of all still just hangs in the air.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. The crime scene itself and the immediate hurdles the police were facing. The attack happened around 4 a.m., right?
That's the estimate. And that time is critical. It's the quietest part of the night in a residential neighborhood like that. The intruder, they believe, got in through a sliding glass door.
Not force, just slid it open.
Seems that way. And while the attack was brutal, the immediate problem for the responding officers was what wasn't there, a real lack of physical clues.
When you think about what police usually rely on, a weapon, a clear break-in, security footage, they had almost none of it.
Exactly. This wasn't downtown with cameras on every corner. It was a student housing area. The investigation details show they were struggling for weeks.
Weeks? Wow.
The traditional evidence trails were just completely cold. No murder weapon left at the scene, which was a large knife. No security cameras that caught a clear image of the person. And, maybe most importantly, no eyewitnesses. Not even from the other people living in the house.
The scale of that initial investigation must have been enormous, just interviewing everyone for miles.
It was an all-consuming effort, But they also had to deal with potential contamination. The scene was only secured hours after it all happened, so they're looking for microscopic evidence in what was, frankly, a chaotic scenario.
So it wasn't going to be a case solved by a quick confession or a lucky fingerprint?
No, not at all. They knew, I think, pretty early on that they were going to have to solve this with data, pure data. They had to pivot from traditional detective work to a digital footprint analysis. That became everything.
And that pivot is where this whole thing turns. They go from this investigative vacuum to a moment where 2 seemingly small clues just change everything.
Yes. And this is where the physical world and the digital world had to line up perfectly. It's really a masterclass in modern police work.
So what was the first break?
The vehicle trail. Investigators started combing through, thousands of hours of surveillance footage from all over the area, far outside the immediate crime scene.
And they found something.
They did. They found a single, consistent anomaly. A white Hyundai Elantra. It was seen driving repeatedly in the area around the house during those critical early morning hours.
Repeatedly. So not just someone driving home.
Exactly. The repeated passes suggested surveillance,
Right.
or at least some kind of targeted behavior. It wasn't random.
Okay, but a white Elantra. There must be thousands of them in that region alone. That's a lead, but it's not exactly a smoking gun.
You're absolutely right. It was just a strong hypothesis. But then came the digital anchor. This is what cemented the whole thing. They got historical call detail records, CDRs, from the cell towers in the area.
And just to be clear for everyone, we're not talking about precise GPS. This is about a phone connecting to a cell tower, right?
Precisely. It's tower pings. And by analyzing just massive amounts of this data, they found a pattern. They found one specific device that pinged off towers consistent with the Elantra's route at the time of the murders.
Okay, that's a big connection.
But it gets even stronger. That same device showed a pattern of visiting the area in the months before the crime.
So pre-operational surveillance.
That's what it looked like. So now you have this dual trail, a specific car repeatedly scoping out the location, and a specific phone mirroring that car's movements, not just on the night of the crime, but for weeks leading up to it.
That's the link. That's how you go from thousands of cars to just one person.
It's undeniable proof of presence. It's so much harder to explain away a data trail that spans months than it is to discredit one fuzzy camera image. That dual evidence was the thread that led them right to a suspect.
And that trail led them to Bryan Kohberger. This is where the story takes such a bizarre, unsettling turn.
It really is. The irony is it's profound. Kohberger wasn't some known criminal or an acquaintance of the victims. He was a criminology PhD student.
At Washington State University, just a short drive away.
Yes, right across the border in Pullman.
A criminology PhD student. I mean, wouldn't he, of all people, know exactly how they'd track him? The digital trail, the car. Was this arrogance or just a massive oversight?
That's the central contradiction, isn't it?
Yeah.
He was literally studying criminal behavior. His focus was on serial offenders, how they think, their motivations. His academic work even touched on how to avoid detection.
So he knew the playbook.
He was writing the playbook. And some have suggested that maybe his familiarity with it all led to a kind of overconfidence, a belief that he could pull off a perfect crime, one that, defied the typical patterns.
The implication is just chilling. He wasn't just studying crime. He may have been testing his theories.
It raises some really deep questions about the line between theoretical knowledge and, well, practical application. Many experts believe the randomness, the lack of a clear motive, that might have been intentional, designed to throw investigators off.
So once they had him identified, things moved quickly. The arrest was on December 30th, 2022.
Yes, in his parents' home back in Pennsylvania. He'd gone there for the holidays.
And that arrest was critical.
It was everything, because it allowed them to get the final piece of the puzzle, hard biological evidence. They searched his car, his apartment, and they found DNA.
And it matched the crime scene.
It matched DNA recovered from a knife sheath that was left behind at the scene. That biological link tied directly to the weapon, and confirmed by that whole digital trail we talked about, it made the case almost unassailable. And yet, even with all of that evidence, all the digital data, the DNA, we have to talk about the biggest unknown. The motive.
The why. Yeah, I remember following this, and the story never quite made sense because there was no connection, no love triangle, no drug deal gone bad, no revenge, nothing.
And that's what makes this case so psychologically disturbing. The investigative files stress it over and over.
Yes.
No known connection between Kohberger and the victims.
No messages, no social media follow.
Nothing. No previous conflict, no digital stalking they could find. The motive, it seems, was completely internal, contained within him.
So that brings us to the legal conclusion. Our sources give us an update from 2025. What happened in court?
Well, by 2025, after years of legal battles and intense media focus, Bryan Kohberger entered a guilty plea to the 4 murders.
A guilty plea, and the reports are clear on the reason for that, right? It was strategic.
It was. He pled guilty specifically to avoid the death penalty. That plea resulted in a sentence of life in prison with no possibility of parole.
So the evidence was just that overwhelming.
It seems so. With the cell tower data showing surveillance and the DNA on the knife sheath, the risk of going to a jury trial and facing execution was just too high for the defense. The evidence of how he did it was so powerful that the absence of why he did it wasn't enough to build a defense on.
So legally, the case is closed. He's in prison for life, but that central paradox it endures.
It absolutely does. The conviction provides legal closure, but it doesn't provide a narrative explanation. We have the man, we have the evidence, but we don't know his intentions. And that absence of a clear why is what makes this case so profoundly unsettling.
Okay, so let's recap the key takeaways here. We started with a crime that looked completely unsolvable at first. No witnesses, no cameras, no traditional evidence.
And the solution came down to digital persistence. Investigators meticulously linking a physical car, the white Elantra, to the digital pings from a cell phone. That established a history of surveillance that led them right to their suspect.
And the suspect himself, the great irony of the case. A criminology PhD student who studied the very thing he was doing. And now we have the resolution. A conviction, life in prison, based on that incredibly strong digital and biological trail.
But the biggest takeaway, I think, is just how unsettling it is when a major case like this ends without a confirmed why. It shows the incredible power of modern forensics, but it also shows the limits of our understanding when it comes to, extreme criminal motivation.
And that brings us to our final thought for you to consider. Given that Bryan Kohberger dedicated his academic life to studying the minds of killers and their motivations, does the total absence of a clear motive in his own crime suggest there's a fundamental flaw in how we understand criminal behavior?
Or does it maybe prove that the darkest parts of human complexity have elements of intent, of malice, that even the most advanced science, the most detailed criminology just can't fully explain or predict? Something to think about as we consider the boundaries of what we can ever truly know about the human mind.